This is one of those really rare situations where there's more people over here than are over here. So if you're coming in through the north doors, just realize that there's a lot of good seating over on this side. On Sunday mornings, it always feels like we're just going to slide right down the hill. Okay, I think we're going to get started. I think a few more people are probably on their way in, but it's so great to see you all today. Saints Alive continues, and today, as you can see, we have this wonderful program on how we're going to all make our last decades golden. I think that's a pretty good golden sounds really good to me as I begin to as those decades are getting closer to me as well. So thank you for coming. We have wonderful guests, of course, for you. We also have a new team on the live stream, so I want to do a shout out for Casey and Sean, who got a crash course. Yay! Casey actually secretly has quite a bit of experience with this because she was doing this down at St. Margaret's before she came and joined our staff, so we're so grateful to have that extra expertise in the house, and Sean is her partner in this whole thing. Really grateful for that. And welcome to our live stream audience. It's great to have you with us as well. So what I'm going to do is just open us up with a prayer of just gratitude for lunch, because I don't think that God minds when we say that we're thankful after we eat instead of before. And then turn this over to Amy Childress, who's going to introduce our guests. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Our gracious God, we thank you for these lives that you give us and the ways in which we can live them well. We thank you for bodies and minds that just keep working somehow, and we thank you for the wonderful science that helps us do better with both those things over time. Thank you for the food you've provided. Thank you for this community that nourishes us and holds us all. And thank you for all that we will hear and learn today. In your most holy name we pray. Amen. Okay, and now Amy.
Hi, I'm not who you came to see, but here we are. We're lucky enough to have Dr. Jonathan Weaver and Cameron Brown discuss the different aspects of being an advocate as you grow older. So Dr. Weaver will go first and talk about the medical aspects. Then we'll have a brief Q&A. Then Cameron will talk about the administrative advocacy and making sure you're set. And then they will take questions together. So without further ado, the doctor will see us now.
Oh, clicker. Do you have the clicker? Okay, I'm Jonathan Weaver. Good afternoon now. So, topic today is how to make your last decades golden, the medical science and political side of growing older well. I'm going to stop there for a minute. I'm a boarded geriatrician, and I figured I would start with that as to what that actually is. Now, there's the study of gerontology, which is the studying of how we age and older people, but geriatric medicine and being a geriatrician is somebody that specializes in people that have geriatric needs. And I see this going as, well, what's that and what's that? And so geriatrics, by definition, has historically been somebody over the age of 65 years old. And I think with medical technology and just all of us living longer these days, 65 is probably the new 40 or 45. You know, midlife crises now happen at 60 instead of 40. So my definition, and I think the more common definition of geriatrics, is someone who is usually over the age of 65 that has chronic medical conditions that cause disability. So you can imagine a 65-year-old with maybe a little bit of high blood pressure, and that doesn't cause any disability, and to me that wouldn't be a geriatric patient. I can Picture a 90-year-old patient with no medications, no medical problems, very active in their community and their family, and I might not classify those people as geriatric patients. So I just wanted to give you sort of an overview of who I am, what I do, how I see geriatrics and aging, and why don't we get started? So geriatrics is very broad and very deep. And what I'm hoping today is that we don't skip too quickly over the surface and we don't go too deep. It's, what's important about geriatric medicine, I could probably be up here for 3 days telling you how much it means to me and how important it really is. So the way I did this today is I broke this into 3 separate sections. We're gonna go on a geriatric time machine here. We're gonna go to the past, we're gonna talk about the present, and then we're also gonna talk about the future. So for the past, we're gonna talk about how do people age well, and I'd like to really make the point that it's never too late to start thinking about aging well. For the present, I'm gonna take you into my office and what's important in my office, what's important to geriatricians, what are the things that really keep me up at night, what are the things that really harm older people, and maybe hopefully give you some tools and some words to talk to your doctor about. Maybe some new words, maybe some words that you've seen before. And then the future, we're gonna think about aging a little bit differently today and what that really means. So hopefully we won't skip too far across the surface and we won't dive too deep. So why don't we get started? So how do we age well? So in any great adventure like geriatrics is, National Geographic scientists went on an adventure and they had a goal to uncover the secrets of longevity. And some of you may know some of this already. What they asked is, what do people have in common that help them age better? And they embarked on an expedition around the world and they discovered 5 places in the world. And I'm sure there's more places than 5, but this is what they've discovered. They found that there's 5 places where people consistently live to over 100 years old. And I always trip up on this term. It's centenarians. There's not an extra centenarians there. So centenarians, we're talking about them. These areas were designated the blue zone. Has anybody heard of blue zones before? A couple people. So those aren't Oompa Loompa people. These are older 100-year-old people. So here they are: Okinawa, Japan; Ikaria, Greece; Sardinia, Italy; Nicoya, Costa Rica; and maybe surprisingly, at least to me, Loma Linda, California, which has the largest concentration of Seventh-day Adventists in the United States. We'll get to that in a minute. So, 5 places. There's probably more places, but you guys have probably traveled and you probably have been to these places and you get a sense, yeah, Italy makes sense, Greece makes sense, Japan kind of makes sense for who and what those types of people are that get to 100 years old. So let's talk about them. So they studied these blue zones. They studied all these people in these areas and they found 9 commonalities amongst them. And they're now known as the common 9 commonalities, for lack of a better term. And so we're going to go through those things, and some of them may seem very familiar and some of them may not. So in no particular order, the 9 commonalities of the blue zones is calorie restriction and fasting, and we're going to talk about each one of these. Strong family connections, having a meaningful purpose in life, low-level physical activity through the day, which this doesn't mean not exercising, but I'll get to that. Staying stress-free, which is so easy to do in this time and age. Plant-based diet, which, I love In-N-Out burgers, so I don't really know how that all works. And so close social engagements, moderate alcohol consumption, we'll talk about that. And then I think it's very fitting for today in this sanctuary, the belief in a higher power, which that might be the most important one, but we'll talk about it. So calorie restriction and fasting. So this is what centenarians do that gets them to 100 years old. Avoid overeating. Pretty simple, but they do it a little bit differently. Most people in the blue zones eat their smallest meal in early afternoon or late evening and don't eat again until the next day. Somebody once quoted that you eat like a king for breakfast, like a prince for lunch, and a pauper for dinner. So largest meal of the day, going to smaller meal of the day. Now, again, we can get into lots of different diets and things like that, but this is what these people do. And prayers before meals. I find this one really interesting. I've got 3 daughters, 11, 13, and 15, and there's sometimes not a delineation between running around the house on cell phones and TVs and computers and sitting down and eating. And what these centenarians do is they actually stop their lives, they sit down, they say a prayer, and now it's time to eat. And from a medical perspective, if you're sitting and calm and eating, you're actually digesting. And so I think it's really interesting before meals is that they basically say, this is a time we're now getting together and we're now eating. Okay, strong family connections. Blue zone centenarians put family first. They commit to their life partners, they invest in their children with time and love, and keep aging parents and grandparents nearby or at home, sort of a close nuclear family. That's if you like your family. People from the blue zones of Okinawa have a term called ikigai, which translates to why I wake up in the morning. And this is having a meaningful life purpose. Having a strong sense of purpose is worth up to 7 years of life added expectancy. They've done studies on this. Low-level physical activity throughout the day. So the centenarians in these blue zones spend the majority of waking hours doing active things like walking, gardening, chopping wood, that's not here in Los Angeles, but household chores and community activities. I'm not going to get into what exercises are really important for geriatric patients, but this is what people did to get to 100. They spent their day being active. Purposeful and productive activity with a cognitive and active purpose. I think we can think of things like that in our lives. So staying stress-free, easier said than done, but we know that stress leads to chronic inflammation and a major factor in age-related diseases. And people from blue zones routinely practice stress-relieving techniques such as meditation and prayer, which I think is very important. There's many different ways to do that during your day, whether it's here or with family or on your own. Okay, plant-based diet. These people consumed a majority of beans and vegetables and fruits and whole grains, mostly unprocessed foods. Foods with low glycemic index, meaning foods that don't have a lot of sugar in them. And meat is only eaten on average of 5 times per month in the blue zone, so probably 1 time a week. Now, again, I'm not recommending that we do this, but this is what these 100-year-olds did. Here's a picture, I hope you can see it in the back. This is Icaria, Greece, and how Icarian centenarians ate for most of their lives. We've got 17% greens, 11% legumes, some potatoes, some olive oil, 6% fish, 20% other vegetables. I think the most interesting thing to me in this is it's 5% pasta. You know, in America we have plates of pasta, and it's just not how you're supposed to eat pasta. I also like the sweet part too, because it's important to enjoy these things, but obviously in moderation. So, close social engagements, probably for lack of a better term, preaching to the choir here. The world's longest living people choose or are born into social circles that support healthy behavior. So sometimes it's luck, how we're born, but having older role models and mentors and being a mentor to younger people is a common variable. What about the alcohol consumption? So this is a long conversation that we're not going to have today about alcohol and aging, but with the exception of the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, all people from blue zones drink alcohol moderately and regularly, and moderate alcohol consumption is defined as 1 to 2 drinks per day. And red wine is the most common alcohol found in the blue zone, and I think more importantly, it's typically consumed with friends and with food. And so I won't go into too much detail about what's right for each patient about alcohol consumption, but this is what they did. And then belief in a higher power. Nearly all centenarians belong to some faith-based community. Denomination doesn't seem to matter. And attending faith-based services 4 times per month or more can add 4 to 14 years of life expectancy. I put this up here because I get a kick out of the fact that they actually looked at how many times you go to church and how long you live. So I'll leave that where it is. So belonging to a spiritual community can improve well-being, which I think we all know. So in conclusion on the blue zones, and again, this is the past, this is what people do to be able to live their longest lives. It's not too late to create a blue zone around you. Just a few of these lifestyle changes can be helpful. If it's just 1 or 2, it really makes a difference. Okay, so now to the present. So I'm going to take you, so we're gone from traveling the world on this National Geographic expedition to my office, which is not the same, unfortunately. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's important to geriatricians, what's important to me, what's important to the doctor that takes care of people with chronic medical conditions that cause disability. I'd like to introduce you to the 5 M's of geriatric medicine, and I can't take credit for this. This is actually how we teach geriatricians to be geriatricians. This is what internal medicine doctors learn when we're becoming geriatricians. And so the 5 M's of geriatric medicine are mobility, medications, mind, multi-complexity, and what matters most. And what matters most is going to be a little bit what Cameron's going to be talking about. I'm just going to touch briefly on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of these somewhat briefly about what I look for in my office, some terms, some statistics. So welcome to my world. Mobility. Falls among adults 65 and older caused over 34,000 deaths in 2019, making it the leading cause of injury death for that group. In 2019, the emergency department recorded 3 million visits for older adult falls. This is a very, very common issue. Preventing falls and other types of common injuries. How do we prevent these falls? We basically need to keep moving, and this is something that we talk about in my office all the time. If you're keeping mobile, if you're keeping moving, if you're exercising, doing some of the things that the blue zone people were doing, you can reduce the number of falls that you have. And what geriatricians do is we differentiate between intrinsic and extrinsic fall risk factors. Extrinsic risk factors are things around you and in your home. Intrinsic factors is my world. What is your body doing to cause you to fall? And I'm just going to give you a little list here. It's a little busy slide here, but intrinsic factors are all the things I think about in my office. Chronic conditions, cardiovascular problems, cognitive problems, gait and balance, medications, blood pressure. But the column for you is what extrinsic factors are in your life that can cause falls. Footwear, hazards in your home. Is it well lighted? Do you have throw rugs? Improper use of assistive devices. Is your eyeglass prescription correct? Are you using ladders and step stools? I have 90-year-olds every year get up on step ladders and stools and fall off. And then distracted walking, we're all guilty of this. I had a patient last week that was looking at his cell phone and just tripped over a curb. And so with mobility, keeping active is really important, but understanding these extrinsic factors are really important also. The CDC actually thinks it's important also. They have this STEADY program, Stopping Elderly Accidents, Deaths, and Injuries. I mean, it sounds great, and we all, as far as I know, I thought just the CDC did COVID. But the CDC does really want to prevent things, and what they tell you to do, and which I want you to do also as a geriatrician, is speak up. Tell your doctor if you've fallen. We don't know if you don't tell us. Onus is on us to ask, but speak up about it. Keep moving, like I said, keep active, check your eyes, make sure you can see. And I think really with the other important part, maybe the most important part, is make your home safer. Look around, rugs, lighting, grab bars, banisters, how do you get out of the car, through the garage, and really having some deliberateness to your step, so to speak. Okay, what about medications? Adults 65 and older tend to take more medicines than any other age group because they generally have several diseases or other health problems at the same time. This is a busy slide, but, bless you, this is a busy slide, but in adults aged 40 to 80, 69% of adults take one or more prescription drugs. 22%, 1 in 5 older adults takes more than 5 prescription drugs every single day. And that's more the norm for our older geriatric patients in their 90s and 95 years old. So it is a very common thing to take lots of medications when you are over 65. So adverse drug events are the 5th leading cause of death in the geriatric population. This is the stuff that keeps us up at night as geriatricians. And our goal is to prescribe treatments exactly for an older person's needs. Nothing more and nothing less. And the way we do that is we use 2 terms for this. And again, this is sort of just to give you a glimpse of what it's like inside our world, is reducing polypharmacy, the term for taking several medications. Does that 1 in 5 geriatric patient that takes 5 or more medications really need 5 medications? Can we pare things down? And then deprescribing is something that we do also, is we planned and supervised dose reduction or stopping medications that may be causing harm or not providing benefit. So polypharmacy is a term we use, deprescribing is a term and way we reduce medications. And so when we're teaching geriatricians, we show them this slide. We say, reconcile the medications of the patient. We say, consider the risk and the benefit of use. We say, prioritize their medications, and then we implement and monitor changes. I put this slide up not for the budding geriatricians in the room, but for this first one right here, the reconciliation of all your medications. I think the most important thing that you can do in a doctor's office is when you see them have a list of your medications. And not only have a list of your medications, sometimes even bringing in the medications so the doctor can see the pills and things like that, because sometimes there can be errors there. When I prescribe a medication, I don't know if you're taking it or not. I need to know if you're taking it. So a lot of times my patients say, oh, Dr. Weaver, he knows what I'm taking. It's like, no, what are you taking? So for medication-wise, if we know exactly what you're taking, every single time we see you, it's going to really help us address polypharmacy, address deprescribing, and hopefully reduce medication so we have less side effects and less morbidity and mortality from it. Okay, the mind. Worldwide, around 55 million people have dementia. The problem is that over the next 30 years, this number is going to get a lot larger. Not because more people are being diagnosed, it's because we're living longer. In 2030, we expect 78 million. In 2050, we expect 139 million. In addition to focusing just on memory loss, the question is, what are the warning signs of a poor memory? And so again, if you think about a geriatrician, it's very easy for us to sit with a patient and the patient says, Doc, my memory is going. But a lot of times, our patients won't tell us that their memory is going. And so I'm sure we all have family members and friends, and I wanted just to share with you that it can be subtle, and there are other symptoms of memory loss. So again, trouble remembering is one of them. What we call in medical jargon a poor historian, somebody that just can't really tell a story that well. We see it in our office as appointment mix-ups. Maybe your friend is missing lunch dates. You're not going to the right doctor on the right day. Again, these are subtle things that can come up with memory problems. Can't follow instructions. You just can't put one and one together to have a good outcome with things. Getting lost. This can be in the grocery store. This can be driving. This can be in buildings. I have to take pictures of where my car is when I park, but you know, someone who defers to family. Oh, my son makes all those decisions, or my daughter makes all those decisions, or my wife makes those decisions, or whatever you think is best. Again, I'm really hearkening on the subtlety of what memory change looks like. Problems with self-care. Does somebody stop showering? Does somebody have dirty clothes when you see them? When they usually wear makeup, do they not wear makeup? Or are they letting their hair go, or not prepping themselves or primping themselves? And so problems with self-care. Unexplained weight loss is an interesting one. If someone cannot put a grocery list together, can't get to the grocery store, sometimes we see weight loss with memory problems. And last but not least, vague symptoms, which I won't go into too much detail, but I have some patients that come in and tell me they just feel lousy. And sometimes we think about a memory problem with that. So, maintaining mental activity is really important, and importantly, talk to your physician about your memory. The reason to talk to your physician about your memory is because there's ways to evaluate cognitive functioning in our office. It's pretty simple. We have two different ways. We have a mini mental status exam and a MOCA exam. I'm not going to go into those in that much detail. But the important thing is to know that we have tests that we can do in the office that can be used to diagnose a problem, or maybe just get a baseline that everything is okay in 2022, and we'll do it next year and see if there's a change. So again, this is an insight into our world of geriatrics. MultiComplexity, people ask me what I do as a geriatrician. And as an internist, we simply make a diagnosis and communicate a plan. Okay, it's pretty simple for us to diagnose appendicitis and communicate a plan. We're going to take the appendix out. But geriatric medicine is different than just regular adult medicine. There's challenges in caring for older adults, and this is, again, my world. There's multiple chronic diseases that we have to think about. We have limitations of current clinical guidelines. There's no good recommendations for colonoscopies after the age of 70 or 75. There's no good clinical recommendations or guidelines for mammograms over 75. So we have to take into consideration the patient specifically. There's no data on older adults. We don't do clinical trials on 90-year-olds. We do clinical trials on 40 to 70-year-olds. Multifactorial nature of geriatric problems and syndromes, and a range of patient preferences. And so it gets really complicated in my office sometimes. What we do in our office is we look at evidence, we estimate prognosis, we look at patient preference, we look at what's feasible, and we communicate a plan. And again, this slide is more geared to the geriatrician in the room, but the reason I bring this up is that the question that you ask your doctor every time something needs to be decided is, what do you think is the right course of action for me and my condition? And if you take one thing away from this multi-complexity slide, is that as a geriatric patient, I would say, my world's complex. Dr. Weaver, what do you think is the right course of action for everything that's going on? Because it might not be the same thing as just taking your appendix out. Okay. What matters most, making sure that a person's individual, personally meaningful health outcomes and goals and care preferences are reflected in treatment plans. And this is really getting to the heart of what Cameron's going to be talking about today. There's advanced healthcare directives, there's pulse forms. I'm just going to slide past this slide, and Cameron will be talking about that. So this is what's important in my office. Hopefully it's important when you come in also to your doctor. And then the geriatric time machine is now going to the future. So I'm going a little quickly, but I want to make sure we have time to get through everything. So the science and future of aging. The crux of the next few slides is going to be, we need to think about aging differently, okay? Stopping the progression of one disease doesn't make it any less likely that a person will die of another. I'll say that again. If you stop one disease, it doesn't make it any less likely that a person will die of another. Someone has a heart attack, that doesn't change anything that happens in the future with other medical problems. Lifespans have increased significantly because of this approach, but increases in health spans haven't kept pace. Lifespan is how long you live. Health span is how long you're healthy. And to me, I'd rather have a health span than a lifespan. We're pursuing cures for individual diseases like cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's, but these don't get at the root of the problem. Whack-a-mole medicine, this is a quote from David Sinclair, whack-a-mole medicine does not work. Just taking care of one problem at a time as it pops up. We must move away from treating age-related diseases and focusing on their roots. We need to think differently about disease and aging. Aging is a disease. Traditional aging theories pointed to our body's natural selection. This is what you're born with, and this is how it's going to go. And DNA mutations. We all hear about sitting out in the sun and you get a DNA mutation in your skin and you get skin cancer. These were the thought processes as the universal causes of aging. You get what you get, and your DNA gets damaged. Current research suggests that that's not true. Again, aging is a disease. Current research defines the 9 hallmarks of aging. Now, it's going to get really busy here for a minute on these slides, but just bear with me here. There's 9 hallmarks of aging. And again, this is not just the DNA degrading. We've got genomic instability, telomere attrition, epigenetic alterations, loss of protein function, deregulated nutrient sensing, mitochondrial dysfunction, cellular senescence, stem cell exhaustion, and altered intracellular communication. The reason I put this up here is that these look like diseases. And that's exactly what's happening to our bodies as we age. We are having problems with these things. You don't see Alzheimer's up here. You don't see coronary artery disease up here. You don't see pneumonia. You don't see stroke. You see at a different level of where the body is not functioning. Address one of these 9 hallmarks of aging, and you can slow aging. Address all of them, and potentially you can stop it. All of the hallmarks of aging that we just talked about are controlled by your genes, okay? And this is where we get into the future of geriatric medicine. And we call these genes longevity genes. We have genes that do things that help us live longer. Here's a couple of them. And again, it gets a little muddy here, but there's sirtuins, there's NAD, there's TOR, there's AMPK. And these things do important things. They regulate cell health and help you with energy and help you with metabolism and help you with glucose. These are longevity genes. And the crazy thing is, we share many of these same longevity genes with organisms all over the planet. Trees, yeast, worms, whales, humans, we all share these longevity genes. But the weird thing is some of these live an exceptionally long time and others do not. My kids helped me with this one. Bowhead whales live to 200 years. There's the oldest Galapagos tortoise was 152 years with the same genes we have. The Hanako koi fish, this one fish, lived to 226 years, and the one that really blew my mind was the Greenland shark, lives at 300 to 500 years with the same longevity genes that we have. Now, obviously, there's differences in us versus them, but we're dealing with genes. These longevity genes is that in aging, they're altered in response to our worlds and our biological stress. And altering these genes may be the key to delaying aging. Now again, this is the future of geriatric medicine. The key is to alter our longevity genes just enough and just in the right way, okay? Remember this slide? 9 hallmarks of aging, all these bad things that can happen. Remember this one, the common 9s of the blue zones? Longevity genes, and this is the great part, longevity genes are positively affected and changed by blue zone lifestyles. It's not just hocus pocus. It's not just these people are doing fancy things and special things to live. These people, by their lifestyles, are affecting their longevity genes. Healthful lifestyles promote longevity through our longevity genes. And if we can get to 100, and this is the take-home message of the future, with lifestyle changes, what are the breakthroughs on longevity we can make with genetic changes to our longevity genes in the future? If we can get to 100 just by a lifestyle, think of what technology can do to treating age as a disease. So, past, present, future, hopefully we haven't gone too quickly through this. The time machine is now back at St. Matthew's, and we're back to the real world. Thank you for having me, and I guess we're going to do a Q&A for a couple of minutes, and all of geriatric medicine explained. So, I'll open it up to questions.
We have a microphone if there's anyone who just wants to put their hand up. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to run over here. He's got his hand up. All right, there you go.
Thank you. You know, as we advance into geriatric age, we all tend to have an internist or the equivalent and a handful of specialists. But I can tell that you know, having the overall involvement of a geriatrician would be wonderful. What is the protocol for the average old person to integrate the expertise of your specialization into our care?
That's a good question. We were actually talking about that before we started today. You know, how do people find me? How do people use me? When do people use me? In general, geriatricians in this day and age are primary care physicians. You know, I in my practice, I'm a primary care physician and a geriatrician for my patients. And so the question goes, how do you transition? In normal ways, people tend to transition to a geriatrician when they have more needs that can't be met by their primary care doctor. And that's different for everybody. And so if you're looking, UCLA Geriatric Medicine, where I did my training, does have a consultative branch of geriatric medicine. So you can keep your primary care physician and make consultations to geriatric specialists at UCLA or USC, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. The way patients come to me usually is that their doctor is retired or they're looking for a change and they join my practice. Hope that answers your question.
Probably as best as it can be answered. Thank you.
Okay. I'm in Santa Monica. I'm affiliated with St. John's, Providence. Yes.
Okay, so lots and lots of information. Okay, you're going to ask a question?
We hear so much talk, particularly in the alternative nutrition world, about gut health. And there seems to be quite a bit of controversy surrounding dairy consumption. So I'm wondering what your take is on these two, and how would you reflect those two questions, gut health and dairy consumption, to the 5 blue zones?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I didn't mention, I don't think I had dairy in any of those things about the blue zones. A couple thoughts. The gut microbiome, which is the 3 trillion, 4 trillion bacteria that are sitting in your gut every day. There's actually more bacteria in your gut than human cells in your body. We think is responsible for a lot of aging and a lot of medical conditions, from cancer to heart disease to dementia. We don't know what the best diet is for the gut microbiome. Dairy is always a weird thing to me, from a science perspective, and I guess from a silly dad joke perspective. We're the only mammals on the earth that drink other people's milk into adulthood, and no other mammal does that. And so to me, that just doesn't sound like a normal thing. Dairy's fine, and it's actually a good source of calcium for bones, which is a whole nother subject. But to your point, I can't really comment on dairy, but the gut microbiome is so important, and I think the most important thing for gut microbiome is a diversity in your diet. And you saw with the Icaria Greece population, they had a lot of different things in their diet, a lot of beans, a lot of plants, a little bit of fish, a little bit of pasta, a little bit of meat. Unprocessed foods really make the microbiome thrive. So fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and staying away from processed meats and things like that. So, but your point, the microbiome is going to be really the next wave of amazing technology and medical breakthroughs, I think, in the next 10 years.
Thank you. I'm going to now just invite you to sit down, and everyone, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much. And then turn the floor over to our second speaker, who is Cameron Brown, who is a member of this parish and has developed her own expertise in this area.
The big button, yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Amy and Jonathan. My personal takeaway, Jonathan, is I am going to focus on the gut mitochondria with my probiotics, and I am going to do intermittent fasting, right? And that'll give me the promised fountain of youth. Okay. So, making your last years golden, the practical side of aging well. Okay. So, I'm going to talk about my caregiving story, aging today in the USA, what that means for you, first steps to take, tackling the hard stuff, needed documents, when it's time to get help, resources, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So my caregiving story I want to share with you because I think it's a typical one and it might help you through your journey is I have 3 brothers. I'm the only daughter. I had more free time, I'd say, in my life than my brothers did when my parents started needing help. My parents were about 85 years old. My mother developed multiple sclerosis at age 60, but really it wasn't, it didn't slow down her life too much until she was about 85. And at about that time, my dad was an old man as well. He was 85. He couldn't get up every night to take my mom to the bathroom. So, and then as a few years went by, my dad developed signs of dementia. So as the few years went by, my mom's body was decreasing in ability and my father's mind was going away. His memory was decreasing. So that's when I got involved. I was the one of the 4 children, and my parents had hired a caregiver at that point to help my mom in the middle of the night, so my dad didn't need to, and she's the one that pleaded with me. She said, please, please, please help. And that was the beginning of my 10-year journey. And I helped until the end, and I think I was successful in giving my parents golden years with dignity, without anxiety. And I think that's what I learned from the whole process. That's what you want to do to make it good with less anxiety. And along the way, I was given the help of a trained patient advocate, and she so motivated me and transformed my mother's life that I pursued studies in patient advocacy and got a certificate from UCLA during the pandemic. So, moving on. Aging today in the USA. The average US life expectancy is 78.6 years. The fastest growing age segment is 85 years plus. 6 in 10 adults live with a chronic disease, like heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, respiratory diseases, arthritis, and obesity, leading to long-term disability. The nation's aging population and existing risk factors and medical advances that extend longevity means there's an increase in medical needs, costs, and care. 30% of Americans over age 80 have some form of Alzheimer's. And 70% of parent caregivers are between the age of 50 and 64 years old. Over 75% of all caregivers are female and may spend as much as 50% more time providing care than males. So, what does that mean for you? I like looking at numbers because it reflects trends, right? So what does this mean for you? You are like everyone else and will lose cognitive and physical abilities. You will lose independence. The aging process is not like it was for previous generations. You may live with ongoing health problems. You may need to ask for and get help. You may need help at home, or you may need to move. That's what's. Sorry. Yeah. Great. And you may need help at home, and you may need to move. Your adult children or extended family will become more involved and assist with certain aspects of your life. And the sooner you accept and embrace this, the less stress you will have and the more joy you will find along the way. Okay. That was a little depressing, right? Right? Okay, a little levity is called for. Now you guys got to laugh. I Googled jokes for seniors. Okay, so here's a joke. I told my physical therapist I broke my arm in 2 places. He told me to stop going to those places. I like that one. Okay. If my body were a car, I would trade it for a newer model. Every time I cough, sputter, or sneeze, my radiant leaks and my exhaust backfires. I was hoping that wasn't too TMI. Okay. And I'm not hard of hearing. I've just heard enough. I figured everybody could relate to that one. Okay. So hopefully a little humor makes it easier for you to digest the information. Okay, first steps to take. Make a gerontologist your primary care physician. Ta-da, 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 right? We were totally in line. And my simple way of looking at that is that a gerontologist is to the elderly as a pediatrician is to children, right? You don't have to have a pediatrician, but it's a subspecialty. So it's, from my experiences, geriatricians, gerontologists, they're more aware of services that you're eligible for. They're more proactive in making recommendations that are appropriate. They're going to think about some of these things I talk about because they work with the elderly. So if you can switch, I know it's hard for people to switch from their long-term primary care physician, but I think in the long run it'll serve you. So next, organize and share important information. So this means lists. Do we have people here in the audience who like lists? Okay, you're ahead of the game, right? Make lots of lists. Your doctors, your medicines, your investments, assets, financial accounts, legal documents, family contact information, neighbor contact information, emergency contact information. We want to have that all in one place, right? If one day you fall and you break your hip in the hospital, how's your wife going to pay the bills unless she knows, right? We want to have this information all easily accessible, probably in a binder for whoever's going to be taking care of you if there's an emergency or in 10, 15 years. And then if you haven't already done this, research how to pay for long-term care. That includes long-term care insurance, Social Security disability insurance, Veterans Affairs benefits, Medicare PACE programs, Medicare Advantage plans, private savings, and for this you consult with an estate attorney. And your gerontologist can probably direct you in the right way as well. And then lastly, create biographical and personal keepsakes for the future. You know, those of you who had children or grandchildren at St. Matthew's, they're so good here at doing that with the, what do we call it, the Family History Project, and the grandchildren interview their grandparents, and so it's all typed up for all the family. Leaving something behind for your family is so, so, so special. And there's lots of tools online to get you started with that. So, tackling the hard stuff. Realize that change brings fear, uncertainty, exhaustion, guilt, and doubt. Those feelings are normal when your life is changing. Ask your adult children to stay with you for 24 hours to assess your abilities and needs and share their perspective. This is so important because I think the way most of us live is we don't live with our parents or our adult children, and you see each other for holidays, you see each other for Sunday dinner, and that's a 2-hour affair. But really what you need is someone to help you analyze what your whole day is like, what it's like for you going through the activities of daily living. So having that 24-hour visit is very, very helpful. And then also discuss your living situation with your loved ones. What are your desires, wishes? Do you feel safe? What about the finances? What can you afford? Also, discuss your end-of-life wishes with your loved ones. That's what do you feel about CPR, being kept alive longer? Talking about this may be awkward, but doing so now makes it easier for the person who cares for you in the future to do what you would like. You want to do it now when you're not in a crisis. You don't want to have to do this when there's a crisis or when your mind is soft or when you're in pain. Do it now, and it's awkward, but there'll be so much power and good feeling in accomplishing that. Non-family support professionals can ease this transition and guide these conversations. And the more you're on top of this, the more power you have. So, navigating the medical system. As you all know, doctors don't have a lot of time for you. Sorry, Dr. Weaver. So, you need to advocate for yourself. You got to be your best manager. Stay organized. Create a system. Prepare for each doctor visit with a list of questions. Ask for summary notes after each doctor visit, right? That's part of your electronic medical records is your summary visit, and your summary visit tells you what your follow-up is. The statistic about people forgetting what doctors said in a visit, it's something like 60%. They get it wrong. You know, we're tense when we're with the doctor, so we don't even remember what we said or we remember it incorrectly. So it's really important to get those summary visits. I think they're the result of the Affordable Care Act. So they're available, but not everyone knows about it. Not all doctors do it, but they're there. I mean, not all doctors will hand it to you automatically, so you got to ask. It'll say what your medicines are, what your next course of action is, when you're supposed to come back. And keep up to date a medical binder, right? I'm old school, maybe some of you are. Review electronic medical records. So I want my binder to cover everything the electronic medical records does. And I want all those lists that we talked about in that binder. You know, this is your go-to binder with everything in it. And you can have, you know, put your tabs in and your doctors per doctor, the names, the address, the medications, when you visit them, etc. And also keep in mind, medical care is private business in America, and doctors need to code services for reimbursement. So once you have that mindset, in some ways how do we say this? It helps when you know when you think about the doctors have to put a code down to prescribe services for you. Right? That's the way it is. There has to be a reason for the service. And I guess I'm thinking of one particular personal experiences. My mother with her multiple sclerosis, I think when she was maybe 87, the doctor recommended it was time for my mother to start on hospice. And when the hospice, and I'll talk about hospice later, hospice is America's best medical program out there, nothing to be afraid of. And when my mother, when the hospice sent a nurse over to qualify my mother, the nurse said, well, what's wrong? You know, tell me about yourself. Oh, I'm fine. I have great care. My daughter is so helpful, and my doctor is so good, and my caregiver is so good. So she wouldn't talk about any of her problems. You know, she had a list of problems this long, but I think because she had a positive attitude, she didn't bring it up. So she wasn't qualified. So then I had to talk to her. Mom, what about blah, 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 blah? So the next day, the nurse came back, Mom told the truth, and she was qualified. But that's an example, I think, of, right? A doctor can't prescribe hospice if you're fine. You know, there has to be a medical code, a medical reason for all your problems. So it's really what Dr. Weaver was saying. You really want to be forthright with your issues. Okay. And then last of all, hospice. I brought that up. Hospice really is one of America's better medical systems. It offers palliative services delivered at home, including nursing, personal care, medicines, physical, speech, and occupational therapies. And I think the myth is that people feel like hospice is something you only get on 3 months before you're dying of cancer. No. In my mom's case, the doctor recommended it for 2 years before I accepted it. Hospice has changed. It's not what it used to be. Hospice, the main thing with hospice is it's not curative, right? So if you have cancer, you're going to the doctor, you're going to the hospital to get it treated. But if you've said, I'm done, you know, I'm too old, I've got too many problems now, I just want to finish out my last time at peace at home, and the doctor knows it's going to be like this, and you have 5 problems, you know, they call it comorbidities, you can ask your doctor. A gerontologist would recommend this. A normal internist might not, but you are eligible for it if you qualify, if there's enough comorbidities. But so then you'll have a nurse assigned to you. The nurse will come to your house maybe twice a month, depending on how severe your problems are. And then the best thing is the nurse manages all the care. So it's the coordinated care. Once you're there, you just realize this is what you want your whole medical system to be like. The nurse is talking to everybody in the party and coordinated everything. But it's not caregivers, right? That's not, if you're at the point where you have 5 serious problems and you've chosen to stay at home, you're still going to need a caregiver. But hospice can come in to offer comfort through the end. And my father was on hospice for over 2 years. And we started hospice for my mother, as she had a lot of problems related to her multiple sclerosis. But my father had bronchitis, went to pneumonia. We thought he was going to die in 2 weeks, so they put him in hospice. And then he got better. And then he got worse and got better, got worse, got better, got worse. And they continued it the whole time because he was all, you know, the trajectory for most of us, it's like this, right? It's not like this anymore, right? That was the previous generation. You're like this, and then boom, you're over. Now it's kind of like this, right? And so hospice is amazing. No hesitation. I'd say please don't hesitate using it for your loved ones, for yourself when the time comes. But next, needed documents. These tools allow you to express your wishes and the decision maker to implement them. Laws vary state by state. Ask your doctor about these. So end of life healthcare wishes. There's 3 things. First, it's the Advanced Healthcare Directive form. I have here a printout of one. It's 5 pages long. You can download it online. You need 2 witnesses, and you'll give a copy to your doctor, maybe to your hospital. The patient chooses someone now to make decisions on his or her behalf in the future. and can include instructions about life support treatments. But most important is the patient chooses someone now, right? So you're choosing a proxy. That's the main purpose of the Advanced Healthcare Directive. It's used by doctors to determine who to contact when the patient is not able to make decisions for themselves. So the second most important form is a POLST. It's a physician order for life-sustaining treatment. It's one page, often supplied and signed by the doctor and kept in a visible place. Do you use pink ones still? Or they're all different colors, but they're usually really bright like this. And it's used by EMTs, doctors, long-term care personnel to make decisions during a crisis. It includes things like DNR, CPR, feeding tube, right? What are your preferences? Because the point is to give you control about the end of your life. Patient and doctor discuss the patient's personal values and goals of treatment and select end-of-life treatment options, reflecting the patient's preferences and the doctor's judgment. Okay, next is authorization to talk to your loved one's doctors. So if you have your spouse who's going to help watch over your medical care, or if it's going to be an adult child, then you're going to need to give them authorization to talk to your doctors. Because of our HIPAA privacy laws, you need to do this. And that can be done by a HIPAA form, a medical power of attorney, or written instruction. In my case, because I knew well all my parents' doctors, it was emails. My parents would send emails or write notes, I authorized my daughter, Cameron Brown, blah, blah, blah. End-of-life financial wishes. A durable financial power of attorney, this is something you need as well. It's used for financial decision-making, and your adult child goes in the driver's seat and you go in the passenger seat. Work with an estate or elder law attorney to draft this legal document. Banks, brokers, and realtors may require this: a letter from the attorney, a joint in-person visit, or joint phone call to process transactions. So it's for financial needs, you're going to need this document and perhaps in-person visits to be able to pass off authorization. Okay, here we go again. Okay, I think these are even better. Okay, Phyllis Diller once said, "I'm at an age when my back goes out more than I do." I thought that was good. And Joan Rivers once said, "You know you're getting older when you're told to slow down by your doctor instead of by the police." Okay. And the good thing about having a bad memory is that jokes can be funny more than once. Okay. When it's time for help. So when the mood is light, after telling jokes, that's when it's a good time to talk about needing help. And you will know when you need help. You'll know when the time is right. And you'll have two options: stay at home and age in place, or move. So if you and your loved ones decide you're going to stay at home and age in place while it's safe, you and your family will need to divide up and assign your responsibilities to others. Who's going to do the bill paying, home repairs, shopping? You want to do this. You want to be forthright and not just muddle through. You want to be proactive. And why do you want to be proactive? Because then you're going to minimize resentment among your children. If you have 2, 3 children, they would like to feel it's equitable. It's never 100% equitable. That's not how it works, right? Some people have more time, some people have more abilities in certain things. But having an open discussion is what's going to make it work better. And at the same time, that discussion is going to allow you to make sure all your needs are being met. Then also, you can hire private caregivers from an in-home care care agency. So that's something you pay out of pocket for private caregivers. In the Palisades, the big agency is Luxe, L-U-X-E. And each caregiver agency has different rules. Some require 6-hour minimum for the caregiver. Some require 12-hour minimum. It just depends. Some say so many hours per week. It all is different, but that's an out-of-pocket expense. And then the next is to enable you to stay at home and age in place as long as it's safe. Doctors can prescribe home health services. So doctors prescribe home health services. This is a benefit that the medical system pays for. You don't pay for this. It's not long-term, though. It's not caregiving. Caregiving is something, again, out of pocket. You can use it for 1 month if you've just come back from the hospital, or if you have a chronic disease, this person can come to your house daily to help. But for home health services, the doctor can prescribe people who specialize in durable medical equipment. So you are eligible for some durable medical equipment, and that can include walkers, that can include simple things like a toilet commode that you put over the toilet in your home so it's up higher so you don't have to bend down, and it's got armrests so you're more stable. Your doctor can prescribe a nurse. The nurse acts sort of as the case manager who oversees all these different individuals who can come into your home. Physical therapy, if all of a sudden your foot's dragging, then your doctor might issue physical therapy to see if you can improve that. Occupational therapy can be issued as well. Rehab, post-fall, post-surgery will be issued. And your doctor can issue home health aid. That's someone who will come in for grooming, who might help you with bathing or a real shower or a sponge bath. And the doctor can send in someone who specializes in home modifications. Dr. Weaver talked about that. You know, they'll say, oh my gosh, look at that area rug. That's a big tripping hazard. Oh my gosh, why don't we put some grab bars in the shower? Things like that, but very, very useful. And lastly, part of home health services includes a social worker. And a social worker's role really, in my experience, is to refer services to you. So they're the person on your team who knows what's available locally. So if you decide to move, maybe you're going to stay at home with these services first, and then maybe you're going to move. Or maybe you decide, okay, I'm ready to go into a new facility and start a new chapter of my life. So when it's time for move, you and your family will decide if it's appropriate to move in with family. That doesn't happen so often these days, does it? So then if you decide to move outside, somewhere else, you can use the services of a senior care referral specialist. So these are people who specialize in placing seniors in these types of facilities. It's a service that's free to you. They're paid for. Okay, sorry. It's itching a little, the tape. No, so a senior care referral specialist will work with you and find out what your interests are. How close do you want to be to your eldest child? What is your cost range? Do you want a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom? But the senior care referral specialist knows the geographical area, and that's why it's so useful. You know, you can get the name of one place and then another place, but this person knows where there's availability. And of course, it's a geographical-based person, so you want to work with someone in the area where you want to move. And they can they'll look for places in independent living. That's where you have a private condo, and if you eventually need care, you're responsible for hiring your own care. Assisted living is the broader term. Some assisted living has skilled nursing and memory care. Some assisted living does not. But assisted living is you're paying more monthly because they're providing the care, right? So the caregivers are their staff. The caregivers are not your employees. Skilled nursing is when you have more acute needs, right? If you've got drip lines, if you've got oxygen tanks, basically if you need more medical assistance, then you'll need the help from skilled nursing. Continuing care is when it goes through all the stages, right? And not all continuing cares are the same, but some continuing cares have independent living, and then they have memory care for the people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and then they'll have skilled nursing as well. And the nice thing about that is you can go from one place to the other on the same campus, in different buildings, but on the same campus. And then totally different is board and care. That's not assisted living. Board and cares are small facilities. Usually they're within neighborhoods, in communities, like there's a few here in the Palisades, and they're homes that have been converted into little, like we would have called an old a nursing home years ago, right? We don't really use that word anymore. But board and care is nice because it's small. There's maybe 6 rooms, and there'll be 3 caregivers, so you can get the ratio of care to residents is higher. But then you might not have the programming that a big facility has, right? A big facility might have a beautiful garden and bingo and 10, 20 different activities a week. A board and care is small and won't. So just like anything in buying a house, there's pros and cons. Exact same thing here. Okay. So while this may seem overwhelming, the good news is that there's lots and lots of resources to help you. There's elder care consultants, also known as geriatric case managers, senior living consultants, or care managers, kind of all one and the same. Patient advocates do that as well, and then some patient advocates focus more on medical needs. There's nonprofit medical agencies. I highly recommend working with these if you develop chronic disease or helping a spouse with chronic disease. I really, really benefited myself working with the National MS Society. They offered me free consultations and advising and guidance that was life-saving. And then I also participated in support groups with the Alzheimer's Association, and that was also so beneficial because I got to hear about everybody else's experiences. So I knew what I could expect, what was to come, and what was normal. So it minimized the stress for me. As I mentioned before, there's home modification services, there's ride services, meal services, estate attorneys, elder law attorneys, bookkeeper. With people who develop Alzheimer's and dementia, often the first thing that goes is ability with numbers, am I right? So sometimes getting in a bookkeeper might be one of the earliest things you do to support care at home, to allow you to live at home longer. Daily money managers, fiduciaries, Medicare Advantage specialists, VA accredited claims agents, and then as we mentioned, the facility placement agent. Those are the senior care referral service people. So these are all resources there to make the journey easier. Words of wisdom. Aging need not be characterized by loss and can be a stage of opportunity and strength. Accumulated knowledge and experience can lead to new accomplishments. Ask. Imagine what it would take to die in peace with dignity and work back from there. Easier said than done, but it's a good one. Those who contemplate their aging, vulnerability, and mortality often live better lives and experience better deaths than those who don't. So that is the end of my presentation. If you'd like to stay in touch with me, if you have any questions, I've got this QR code for you here. What you need to do, right, if you have any questions and you want to contact me, I'm going to ask you to give me your contact information so I can contact you. So you pull out your phone, and then you click on the camera icon, and then center your phone on the QR code, and a little bubble will pop up, and it says forms, and then you just click on the forms. Oops. Oh, it worked for you there.
Should be a guest Wi-Fi network active in the church that doesn't require a password.
Right.
So just check in your Wi-Fi on your phone, see what networks are available.
Okay.
You shouldn't have to get a password.
All I'm asking for is this is if you want to follow up, if you have any questions.
And
I
if
just
this
need
doesn't
your
work
name
for
and
you,
phone number and email.
If your phone fails, we have her email address.
Exactly.
So you can just email me or
Right.
we'll
figure
the
it out.
office, and we will forward contact information. Cameron,
So thank you very much.
fabulous
Great.
presentation.
Good, good.
Thank you so much. I mean,
Thank you.
she just, what a gift to get so granular. Seriously, it's like, this is how you do it. Okay, so Bob already told me he has a question, so he's going to go first, and then we can take a few more.
So I'd like to thank Dr. Weaver and you, Cameron. Exceptional presentations, absolutely exceptional. And I did have a question for both of you. If I understand it correctly, California has a new statute allowing people to end their own lives. Is that true? And if it is, how does that all work? And have either of you had the experience in dealing with the statute and how it applies?
Is this still on? Yes, it is. It's a really good question about the death with dignity. It's something that comes up in my practice a lot. The first question my patients ask me, it's like, well, what are your religious beliefs, and do they get in the way of death with dignity? And as a physician, we meet our patients' needs, and my things don't get in the way. But it works really well, but it doesn't, okay? And you need to have a terminal illness, usually 6 months to live, and you need to be seen or evaluated by a psychiatrist and a doctor to say that you are in sound state of mind and have no depression and no suicidal wish, okay? And it works really well for like cancers and degenerative conditions, but the biggest gap that I see in my practice is dementia. Because if somebody says, if I no longer recognize my kids, I no longer recognize my family, I can't do my daily livings, I don't want to live anymore, I can say, that's great, I understand that. But when it comes to deeming if they can make a decision at that time, they can't make a decision at that time. They're not compos mentis. So dementia is the biggest flaw of this law. The law works, and we have, you got a list of a lot of different people. We have magic Rolodexes still in this day and age, and we have people that can help with that when the decision comes. But the biggest problem is dementia, and that's one of the biggest reasons why people would want to say that they don't want to keep living. So it's easy with cancer, but it's not so easy with more common things. So.
But I'll just add my personal experience through friends is, and I know we talked about this earlier, and I guess it's changed a little, but my friend her mother was dying of cancer, and the mother was ready to end her life, and the daughter went to CVS and picked up the drugs, and then went home and had mom and dad sit down on the couch, and the doctor prescribes lots of pills, each pill of small dosage, so it's harder to do. You know, they're make a real hard effort to end your life. And so then my friend had to crush all the pills, mix it in the applesauce, and then she fed her mom. and her mom went peacefully. And Dr. Weaver was saying there's specialists who can do this too, so your loved one doesn't have to do this. But yeah, it's legal now in California.
Yeah, I also want to thank you for a really comprehensive presentation. Having worked in this field, I think it's my experience that patients and families get a big jolt when they realize that Medicare doesn't cover most of this type of care. Covers it to a limited degree. Hospice is the one exception. If you have a qualifying diagnosis, that is pretty comprehensive care, but not everybody qualifies for hospice or wants hospice. I'm wondering what your experience is in terms of the relative costs of in-home care versus some type of institutional care. Because my understanding is not everybody is going to need a lot of long-term care, but if you do, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have long-term care, that will help, but a lot of people don't have long-term care, or the long-term care is limited. So your thoughts on managing costs at this stage of life?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is first just to assess the situation, right? Like with any financial decision. And that's, are there two of you at home, right? Are two of you needing caregiver needs? If you were to move in a facility, would you be put in separate facilities because of your disabilities? So you really have to look at the exact specifics to be able to determine which is better, less costly, right? But yes, private care is expensive. And that's what I was trying to be clear. Home health services, while they provide great care, it's not caregiving. It's short term, maybe 8 weeks, and then it can be renewed another 8 weeks. But caregiving is a private cost. Generally, the lowest cost option is board and care. A board and care, that's generally the lowest, where you're in a converted home, there's usually 3 caregivers and 6 residents. That's usually the best deal. And then assisted livings, the average in Los Angeles currently is $5,500 a month. But of course, the reality is there's a huge range, right? And beautiful gardens, linens at the table or not. So it just all depends.
Other questions? I know we have a lot of stuff that's now in our heads, so I will be asking you, I've already been asked to find out if we can get your presentations to be able to, okay, we have a list of attendees. We will send those all out to you afterwards, sometime in the next day or two. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for staying. This is a little bit longer than we normally go, but I think it was worth every minute, so thank you for that. And yeah, do that. Thank you again. So grateful for you helping us out. And then I want to take this opportunity to give a very brief advertisement for the next Saints Alive program, which is going to be on Wednesday, December 7th. And now I'm suddenly looking and I can't find it. Hold on just 1 minute. Shoot, I emailed it to Sean. Just a minute. So it's going to be, every year we have been having, the last several years we've had Diesel Books come and give us the quick tour of great reads from the last year, and they've talked about different, topical categories like fiction, nonfiction, and so on. So this year we're changing things up a little bit. We are actually having a Christmas book event that's called I Treasure This Book, and you will have the opportunity to hear a select panel of fellow parishioners reviewing their favorite reads from the last year. And some of them are going to be, I'm going to just tell you some of these. If you've maybe read some of them, Paul Kruger on Empire of Pain, Judy Jones on Late Migrations and Graceland by Margaret Renke, Dan Keating on Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. We had a good chuckle over that one on the patio when none of us could remember anything. Marcy Moore is going to speak about The Latecomer by Jean Han, I can't pronounce the last name, Kurelitz, and Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And then I understand Catherine Kiefer's also going to give a book review. And then Diesel is going to come and just do a piece of it on great children's books for those of us who have children and grandchildren that we're looking for good Christmas ideas for. They will also bring copies of the books that are being reviewed. So don't miss it. That's Wednesday, December 7th, and the usual parish channels will be bringing you publicity and opportunities to register. So once again, thank you to all of the Saints Alive volunteers, to our hospitality people, Jane and Susan, who make that meal happen every time. We really appreciate it, and Bob for your leadership with program, and Amy for putting this together. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you soon.